A big shout out to my amazing listeners. Thank you for all the love and support. I greatly appreciate it. In a village obsessed with beauty, one woman's kindness becomes her greatest strength. When a wounded prince is left for dead, Mandisa, the girl no one sees, steps in to save him. But when her sisters take the credit, will the truth ever come to light? Discover the power of true beauty in this heartwarming tale. Once upon a time, a young woman named Mandisa lived in the village of Nyamapanda. Though blessed with a kind soul and a generous heart, the villagers harshly judged her for her large frame, which did not fit their narrow definition of beauty. While other maidens were slender and admired, Mandisa became the subject of cruel jokes, mocked for her size, her clumsy movements, and even her quiet nature. The cruelty was even worse at home, where her two sisters, Zola and Thandi, thrived on the attention they received. Zola and Thandi were the village beauties, slim, graceful, and always adorned in fine clothes. They basked in the admiration of others, while Mandisa bore the sting of their constant insults. Whenever she walked through the village square, whispers followed her like a shadow, laughter trailing just behind. Even the children teased her, calling her cruel names that echoed in her heart long after the sound had faded. Her mother, though not openly cruel, emphasized the importance of beauty in a woman's life. She spent countless hours with Zola and Thandi, brushing their hair, adorning them with jewelry, and instructing them in the art of charming men. Mandisa, meanwhile, was left to do the chores, barely acknowledged. "Why can't you be more like your sisters?" her mother would sigh. "You'll never find a husband with that size." The most painful moments came from her sisters. Zola and Thandi spared no opportunity to mock Mandisa's size or clumsy attempts to dance. "It's no wonder no one looks at you," Zola sneered. "You're like a buffalo in a field of gazelles." Their words wounded her deeply, though Mandisa never showed it. She found solace in the quiet places of her world, beneath the shade of a great baobab tree, where she would sit alone and sing softly to herself. Her grandmother, Gogo, was her only refuge. Gogo saw beyond appearances and loved Mandisa deeply. "Your heart is beautiful, Mandisa," she would say, gently stroking her granddaughter's hair. "Kindness shines brighter than any beauty, my dear." Often, Mandisa found herself wishing her father was still alive. He had treated her like a treasure with unconditional love that made her feel special. His death when she was young left a deep void in her life, and Gogo was the only one who filled it. Every day, Mandisa prayed that her grandmother would live long enough to continue loving her. She could not imagine her life without Gogo's reassuring presence. One day, news spread through the village that Prince Nkosi, heir to the throne, had returned after many years of studying abroad. The village buzzed with excitement. The young maidens dreamed of catching his eye, and Zola and Thandi were no exception, already scheming about how they would capture his heart. But Mandisa's heart remained untouched by the frenzy. "Why should I care about a prince?" she thought. She was used to being invisible and resigned herself to never being chosen for anything in life. Unbeknownst to Mandisa, fate was about to intertwine her life with the very prince she thought would never notice her. Nkosi, having spent years abroad, had returned as a man, admired from afar for his looks and charm, though few had seen him since his arrival. Restless after the formalities of his return, Nkosi decided to escape the confines of the palace for a day. He longed for solitude and, in a rare, impulsive decision, ventured into the wilderness alone, without guards or attendants. That choice would change everything. Nkosi had wandered deep into the forest when a wild animal ambushed him. He fought bravely, but the creature's speed and strength overpowered him, leaving him with a deep, jagged wound across his side. Bleeding heavily and growing weaker by the moment, Nkosi staggered through the forest, trying to find his way back. But he had spent too much time abroad and had forgotten the land's nuances. As days passed, several villagers spotted the wounded stranger, but none dared approach him. Covered in blood and dirt, his once noble appearance hidden, many feared he was a criminal or trickster. Nkosi's hope began to fade. He was close to surrendering to the darkness when, through his fading vision, he saw a figure approaching, Mandisa. Mandisa had been collecting herbs and firewood in the forest when she spotted a man lying near the path. He was barely conscious, his tunic soaked in blood, his breath labored. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something in his eyes, something desperate and familiar that stirred her. Without hesitation, Mandisa knelt beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You need help," she whispered gently. His eyes fluttered open, meeting hers for just a moment before he drifted back into unconsciousness. She knew she couldn't leave him there. The villagers would think the worst and refuse to help. Mustering all her strength, Mandisa dragged the man, unaware he was the prince, toward her grandmother's house. It was a long, painful journey, but Mandisa's determination never wavered. Upon seeing the injured stranger, Gogo took charge immediately. "We will nurse him back to health," she said. Under her grandmother's guidance, Mandisa cleaned his wound, applied healing herbs, and stayed by his side as he lay unconscious. At night, Mandisa sang softly, hoping her voice might soothe him as he struggled to survive. As the days passed, Mandisa grew attached to the mysterious man, though she had no idea who he truly was. She poured her heart out to him in those quiet moments, telling him of her loneliness, her struggles, and her wish for a life where she wasn't defined by her appearance. She spoke of her father, the love she missed, and the comfort she found in her grandmother's unwavering affection. And though he remained unconscious, something about being near him brought her peace. Unknown to Mandisa, Gogo had begun to suspect the truth. The stranger's noble features and certain subtle markings were impossible to miss. "Mandisa," she said one evening, "I believe this man is no ordinary stranger. He may be the prince." Mandisa's heart froze. The prince, the very man who had set the village aflame with excitement? She had nursed him, saved him, and shared her most private thoughts with him. Panic gripped her. What would happen when he awoke and saw her? Surely he would be repulsed. She imagined the rejection in his eyes, the laughter that would follow if he knew it was she, the awkward and invisible sister who had saved him. But there was no time for fear. Mandisa continued to care for him, pouring all her tenderness into her task. Meanwhile, rumors of the missing prince spread through the village, sending search parties far and wide, even as the king grew desperate. Finally, when the prince's fever broke and his wound began to heal, Gogo sent word to the palace. She revealed that the lost prince had been found and was being cared for at her home. The news spread like wildfire. The king, overcome with relief, gathered his physicians and a large entourage, rushing to the grandmother's hut. When they arrived, the king was overcome with emotion at seeing his son, weakened but alive. He immediately offered to take Nkosi back to the palace, but the royal physicians, after examining the prince, advised against moving him. "He is still too weak," they said. "Moving him now could worsen his injuries. Let him stay here until he is strong enough to travel." The king reluctantly agreed, but expressed his deepest gratitude to Mandisa's family. He promised that whatever they wished for would be granted, a royal reward for saving his son's life. When news spread that Prince Nkosi was recovering at Gogo's house, Zola and Thandi were quick to seize the opportunity. They rushed over, eager to charm the prince and claim credit for his recovery. As Nkosi's eyes fluttered open for the first time, they were there, crowding around his bed, their voices sugary sweet. Prince Nkosi, Zola said, leaning closer, we've watched over you night and day. You're safe now, thanks to us. Thandi smiled, her voice dripping with false sincerity. We couldn't bear to see you suffer, Your Highness. We've done everything to nurse you back to health. Nkosi, still weak and confused, nodded slightly, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He felt grateful to the women standing before him, but something in his heart felt wrong. A distant echo tugged at him, a softer, humbler voice that had spoken to him in his darkest moments, a voice that soothed him with lullabies and gentle words. As the days passed, Zola and Thandi continued to visit, parading themselves in front of the prince, confident that one of them would soon be chosen as his bride. They laughed and flirted, casting each other sideways glances in their rivalry. Mandisa, on the other hand, kept her distance. Her heart ached as she watched her sisters take credit for all she had done, but she remained in the shadows, afraid of being seen. She knew Nkosi would never choose someone like her. He would never remember the songs she had sung or the tenderness she had shown him in those quiet, unseen hours. She was used to being invisible. Though his body healed slowly, Nkosi's mind grew sharper each day. He began to notice things he had missed, the way the herbs had been prepared with such care, the songs that had soothed him through restless nights, the soft words that had accompanied him through his fevered dreams. These details nagged at him, and the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. None of these things had come from Zola or Thandi. Late one night, as Zola and Thandi bickered over who would wear the finest dress to marry the prince, Nkosi grew restless. He stepped outside for fresh air, and it wasn't the cool breeze that caught his attention, but a soft melody drifting through the stillness. He followed the sound, moving quietly around the side of the hut, and there, beneath the large baobab tree, sat Mandisa. Her voice, low and sweet, was the same voice he had heard while unconscious. She sang the same lullaby that had comforted him in the depths of his suffering. In that moment, everything clicked into place. It was her. Mandisa had been his true savior. Nkosi stood there for a long time, hidden in the shadows, watching her. The realization washed over him slowly and deeply. This was the woman who had cared for him, the woman whose voice had brought him peace. Zola and Thandi had only arrived once he had begun to recover, but Mandisa had been there all along, tending to his wounds while the rest of the world slept. He continued to watch her, her expression serene in the moonlight, her lips moving softly as she sang. She seemed so different from her sisters, so at peace, so content in her quiet solitude. Nkosi's heart stirred. Why had she hidden herself away? Why had she allowed her sisters to take credit for her care? As he observed her, he realized something profound. Mandisa didn't seek recognition. She had helped him because it was in her nature to care for others, not because she wanted praise. For the first time since his return, Nkosi felt a deep pull toward Mandisa, something beyond gratitude. There was a quiet strength in her, a beauty that surpassed anything outward. He was drawn to her kindness, her humility, and her heart. The next day, after Zola and Thandi had left, Nkosi asked Gogo to sit with him. "Tell me," he said quietly, "who was it that truly saved my life? I remember things, songs, soft words in the night. It couldn't have been them." The grandmother smiled gently, her eyes wise and knowing. "Your memory serves you well, Nkosi. The one who saved you is not the one standing by your bed each day, seeking your favor. It was Mandisa, my granddaughter, who carried you from the wilderness and nursed you with her own hands. She has been by your side since the moment you arrived." Nkosi was stunned. He had seen Mandisa before, but always in the background, always overshadowed by her sisters. He had never considered that she might be the one to whom he owed his life. But why has she not come forward? Why does she hide? Gogo's expression softened. Mandisa is different from her sisters. She doesn't seek attention or praise. She has always been told she is not beautiful, that her worth is less because she doesn't look like them. Her heart is pure, but the world has been unkind to her. Nkosi felt a pang of guilt. He had judged Mandisa, just as others had, without truly seeing her. But now he understood it was her care, her quiet presence, that had brought him back from the brink of death. She had seen him at his lowest and shown him nothing but kindness. A week later, the king returned to Gogo's house, overjoyed to see his son fully recovered. True to his word, the king offered anything the family desired as a reward for saving Nkosi's life. Mandisa's mother, eager for wealth and status, stepped forward with her request. "Your Majesty," she began, "we ask for only one thing, that the prince marry one of my daughters, Zola or Thandi. Surely it is a fitting reward for our family's service to the crown." The king, bound by his promise, nodded thoughtfully. "If that is what you desire, I will honor it." But before the decision could be finalized, Nkosi spoke with quiet authority. "Father, may I have a word?" The room fell silent as Nkosi addressed the king. "I will not deny the debt we owe this family. They have indeed saved my life. But before I choose a bride, I must tell you something. It was not Zola or Thandi who tended to me in my most desperate hours. It was Mandisa, the sister who hides in the shadows. She carried me here, cared for my wounds, and saved my life when no one else dared." Gasps filled the room. Zola and Thandi's faces turned pale, their eyes wide with disbelief. Their mother looked as though she might faint, unable to comprehend what was happening. Nkosi continued, his voice steady. "I will not marry for appearances. I will marry the one who showed me the true meaning of kindness and compassion. Mandisa's beauty lies in her heart, and that is the kind of beauty I wish to have by my side as queen." Zola and Thandi were furious. How could their plump, awkward sister, a girl they had mocked and belittled their whole lives, be chosen by the prince? Their rage consumed them, and in their jealousy, they lashed out, accusing Mandisa of trickery and manipulation. They claimed she had bewitched Nkosi while he was weak. But their words fell on deaf ears. Nkosi had seen the truth for himself. No amount of spite or jealousy could change that. Mandisa, still in shock, could hardly believe what was happening. She had long ago accepted that she would never be noticed, never be loved for who she truly was. But here was Nkosi, standing before her, choosing her, not for her appearance, but for the kindness she had shown him. With tears in her eyes, she looked at Nkosi and whispered, "I am not worthy of such an honor, Your Highness. I am not like my sisters. I am not beautiful." Nkosi stepped closer, gently taking her hand. "You are more beautiful than you know, Mandisa. It is your heart that has captured mine, not the beauty that fades with time. You saved my life when no one else would. That is worth more than anything in this world." Word of Nkosi's choice spread quickly through the village. Many could not believe that the prince had chosen Mandisa, the girl they had once ridiculed. Some pitied him, thinking he had been tricked. But as preparations for the royal wedding began, something remarkable happened. The villagers began to see Mandisa in a different light. The stories of her courage, her kindness, and her selflessness spread throughout the kingdom. People who had once laughed at her now admired her. She had saved the prince, not with beauty, but with a strength of character that far surpassed the shallow ideals the village had once held. On the day of the wedding, Mandisa stood before the village in a dress of the finest silk. She was still larger than the other maidens, but there was something different about her now, a quiet confidence that radiated from within. As she walked down the aisle to marry Nkosi, there were no whispers of mockery, no cruel words. Instead, the village watched in awe, seeing for the first time the true beauty that had always been there. As queen, Mandisa ruled with wisdom and compassion, standing beside Nkosi as his equal. Together, they transformed the kingdom, promoting kindness, respect, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to be truly beautiful. Zola and Thandi, humbled by their sister's rise to greatness, eventually sought forgiveness for the way they had treated her. Mandisa, ever kind and gracious, forgave them, understanding that their cruelty had come from a place of insecurity. Gogo, who had always seen Mandisa's true worth, lived long enough to see her granddaughter's transformation, from the ridiculed girl to the beloved queen. Every evening when the sun began to set, Mandisa would sit beneath the great baobab tree, remembering the days when she had sung to herself, wishing for a different life. She no longer wished for anything, for she had found all she ever needed, not in the world's approval, but in the love she had always carried within her. The end. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring tale. See you in the next video.